So hello, everyone. We're going to give a few moments as people trickle in here. We have a couple hundred folks registered, and it can take a moment for everyone to get set up. So thanks for being patient. Oh, Chris is off to the piano. All right. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the 5th webinar in our 2020 series, today discussing lockdown productivity. FYI, we are recording this webinar, and we look forward to sharing these slides and recording afterwards. So my name is Anders Sundquist, the founder of Flawless Recruit. Chris Guthertz, our managing partner, will be hosting the town hall today, and I'm excited to have a productive discussion. So allow me to introduce our panelists before we kick off. First is Raghav Singh, the Director of Product at Salesforce. Hey, Raghav.
Hello.
Next panelist is John Woodyard, the Senior Director of Engineering at Dell. Hey there, John.
Hey there.
Next is Dart Lindsley, Global Process Excellence for People Ops at Google. Hey, Dart.
Hello.
Next is Jen Stoural, the Director of Global Talent Acquisition at Smartsheet.
Yeah.
And the final panelist is Ravs, Kaur, the CTO of Uplevel.
Hi there.
And of course, last but not least is Chris Guthertz, who will be playing MC today.
And piano a little.
If we're lucky. So to introduce myself, I founded Flawless Recruit in 2017. And we're a Seattle-based boutique recruiting firm. We specialize in talent mapping for full-time, contract, and executive search. What talent mapping means to us is we use market research and identify signals for hireability to architect personalized campaigns that scale. But enough about me and my company. Let's discuss the topic at hand today. So during the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, our clients asked, how is the market responding? What are other companies doing? Desperate for information as we all pivoted to remote abruptly. This inspired us to connect the national tech and recruiting communities by sharing tribal knowledge for success during these unprecedented times. So in the last 4 webinars, we've covered topics ranging from diversity and inclusion, remote hiring strategy, remote compensation, the new normal, whatever that is, radical empathy, and retaining top engineering talent, and a lot more. So we hope you learned something useful from this town hall today as we unpack lockdown productivity and how we can all adapt and improve as our world changes daily. So without further ado, Chris, let's kick off the discussion.
Already had a question saying, was that live piano? And the answer was yes, I'm alive, and that was piano. And just for those, I know everybody's familiar with Zoom now. We were talking about this in the pre-meeting. In case you're just not that familiar with Zoom, something that I've had to learn early on was hit the gallery view, because if you're just looking at the speaker view, you don't get to see all the reactions from each of us, and I think it's kind of fun. So we're, as you guys know, we're talking about lockdown productivity, but that's just really kind of a kickoff issue, so that we can do literally sharing together, ask each other questions. This is it's a town hall, meaning I'd like it to be a robust discussion among these leaders in both recruiting and engineering. And we love being that intersection of recruiting and engineering. And that's one of the things that Flawless kind of prides ourselves on. So the question at hand, the question we came up with to start with is about productivity. And maybe we can kick it off by asking the question, how does your company traditionally measure productivity in engineering and recruiting? And I'll just make that an open question. Any of you can jump in. I know Uplevel, you might have some interesting, maybe I won't make this just an open question. I'll start with Ravs. saying, I know that Uplevel, you guys are all about productivity. Why don't you tell us a little bit, maybe even about Uplevel, and then some thoughts about the question.
Sure. Just for context, yes, Uplevel is an engineering effectiveness platform, right? We're building product that provides data and insights from everyday systems that engineers use to give insight into like how effective is the team being. And we talk about productivity a lot, but at Uplevel, we intentionally don't use that word very, directly, because when developers hear, I want to make you more productive, they have this reaction, which is, okay, what does that mean? Are you going to make me work more? Like, you can't really measure productivity with these traditional things that are out there, like lines of code and work items done. And it's always like, it's a creative discipline, right? And so what we tend to focus on when we think about effectiveness is the environment the developers are in best suited for them to do their best work. So with those kinds of things, we look at do developers have time to get deep work done, right? Are the processes in place actually helping or blocking people, right? So it's really the upstream conditions in which developers work. Are they interrupted in Slack all day, right? You talk to developers and they love hackathons because it's uninterrupted time. It's the freedom to say, like, I can get creative. And then back to their life ends up being, I'm up, I try to do something, I go into a meeting, I have lunch, I'm interrupted 5 times, and the day is gone and I don't know it. So, and so that's what we're really trying to sort of hone in on, is what can make you really effective. And I'd say, like, in this remote and lockdown productivity space, I'm seeing 3 phases, and I'd love to hear other opinions. The first phase of, just us and our customers has been, is work happening? Are people able to work? It's this like panic of, how will we get anything done, right? And then as you see, no, people are getting stuff done, and they can work from home and things like that. The second phase is, how can we make it the most effective? How can we prevent burnout? Zoom fatigue is a real issue. People are spending more time working because there's no real physical boundaries between work and home. So you get into that space of like, okay, now it's real, I've internalized it, and I'm starting to burn out. How can I sustain this over a long period of time? And we have now sustained this for almost 6 months, right? And we're producing a lot. And now it's like that third phase of, is innovation going to be the same without that, in-person collaboration? And how do we sort of keep up that pace? How do we simulate the, random idea you talk to somebody over at lunch? And now it's a very intentional, like, I'm going to Zoom you because I need to talk to you. So I feel like we're at that third phase of productivity, if you will, which is how do we kind of keep being innovative and keep feeling like we're part of the same team when in reality we don't, see each other every day.
Just want to say, I love the fact that you're commenting about it being a creative process. And, it's traditionally, when we're talking about productivity, trying to measure things like lines of code for engineers is like the one thing that'll drive them completely crazy. Am I right? And I know that because we've talked previously, and I'm actually good friends with both Raghav and with Dart. Dart, you had mentioned to me that being remote is something that you have had long understanding of. It's been in your past 2 companies. You want to talk a little bit about, because I think Rob's brought up the point about burnout, Zoom burnout and some of that. I know that you have dealt with some of those issues in the past, right?
Yes, and actually Rob said something that I've really experienced, which is that we used to have commute time, and commute time was at least, a quiet time. And in my old company, which was Cisco Systems, we were entirely virtual. And what happened is we worked from 7 in the morning until 7 at night every day. And when I joined Google 2.5 years ago, it was a physical in-person kind of company. And so there was this really lovely commute time on either end of it, which was fairly peaceful. But it took a couple of months, but we're right there at sort of 7 to 7 kind of work, at least 8 to 6 kind of work, because those boundaries are gone. So I totally agree with that. my experience at Google, I mean, one of the things we talked about in the work up to this meeting was, I lived in that virtual environment for a long time, and I saw what the effects of that were over a long period of time. And I think one of the things I saw was increased tribalization. And so I think that there's the short-term effects of COVID and what that does to productivity, but the long-term effects was people became more and more strangers and could imagine worse things about each other. And when I go back now and I visit with my friends at Cisco, I'm surprised by what I hear because I do feel some of that distance.
If I can just add to that,
Yeah.
I've only been at Salesforce a little over a month, and I came from Korn Ferry, which is a substantially virtual company. And what we did, what we saw at Korn Ferry, I was there 3+ years, almost 4, was that even though we had been a virtual company, the fact that there were still reasonable numbers of people in the office in some ways did force us to limit our work hours. When it became 100% virtual, most people found that they are working substantially more. Some of the complaints that were heard was that, well, I don't have any gaps between meetings because I don't have anywhere to go. So even the little few minutes I would have taken to get from one room to another or something is gone. It's just block, 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 block. And you're seeing that on other numbers. I just saw this Harvard Business Review study that was reported in The Economist that people are working on average more time than they spend on average commuting. So whatever was gained by, in some ways, on the other hand, it also said that the average meeting has gotten shorter. So, are we better off? Are we worse off? I can't say we've noticed either at Korn Ferry or, certainly at Salesforce that there's been a, loss of productivity that anyone's commented on or anything like that. Salesforce literally just yesterday announced their best quarter ever, which in terms of new products, revenue, all that stuff. But there is recognition that people are sensing some burnout. They're encouraging people to do less meetings, avoid on Fridays, try to skip meetings, avoid having meetings altogether, just to lessen that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's early days, but these are trends, some of which are at least not encouraging in terms of, what burnout may result.
And I will say that, from one of the other things you have to think about too, from that burnout perspective is we're going through the summer, but we're going through COVID. And so people, aren't taking the vacations that they normally would because they can't travel. And one of the things that we really, I think as leaders have to do is make sure that we keep our fingers on the pulse of how our teams are they taking that time off, and really making sure that they realize, hey, even if you're not going to go anywhere, you really need to shut down. You really need to have that separation, because to your point, I think a lot of what we saw, especially early on before we kept it in check, was that instead of working from home, you were living at work. And not having that break, not having that separation definitely is leading some to that burnout. It's also with the complexity of, like when you're talking, Dart, about your wife being a kindergarten teacher, with parents who were able to send their kids off to school or to preschool or something like that. Now they're trying to pull, both that home life in as well as their work life, really can complicate things.
I want to pick up on that and actually ask you, Jen, and also the rest of you. We've discovered on the recruiting side of the world that now that we've moved to Zoom interviews and all of that, candidates are very, very nervous about that home environment, or maybe what's in their background, or if a kid is run into the middle of their interview and interrupt them and interrupt their train of thought and all that. Have you been experiencing some of that, Jen? And yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah, we do. And what we've really tried to instill with our candidates is that sense of belonging. We're all in this together. And we start our hiring process with a recruiter phone screen. We do not put them on Zoom. That's what we would do if we were in the office, So we're consistent with that and what that experience looks like. And we give them all of the resources on the tips and tricks and what you're doing. If you are on Zoom, you can change your name, you can update here, here's your volume, but really bringing the human element on, we're in this together. We completely understand that you have, and set context with the hiring team as well. You know, they have some children at home. This might be coming into the process. I was on one interview where a 4-year-old came up and was tattling on the 2-year-old, and we were able, like, allowing that space of that humanity to happen. She then also had like stepped outside and it was really hot, but just continued the conversation, but acknowledging it and not being afraid to talk through it. Yes, you have your roommate or your spouse or your dog coming into the screen. We're all in this together, but really meeting them where they are and giving them that sense of like radical empathy that we've talked about previously. So setting the context with the entire team as well, and holding your teams accountable to the same type of experience is been successful so far for us.
Well said, Jen. I'll add that, you know, we have been doing some interviewing recently, and even as interviewers, even though my kids know this time to this time, you know, keep your voices down, it doesn't always happen. And when candidates see, like, you know, their interviewers in the same kind of situation where they have kids running around, and that's totally okay. Like, I've had candidates tell me after that that was great to see. Like, it felt very human, it felt very personal, it felt very you know, real, and the culture of the company sort of comes through when you acknowledge that people have these distractions at home.
And I think the shift really comes from, while we're in office, it was about the work and it was about the productivity and the impact, but now it's about the people. It's about who they are, how they can be successful, and giving them that space to be there in the space that we're in. So less about the tactical piece of the work and the humanity of what's happening.
Rob, that was just on cue. That was totally on cue.
Yeah.
I promise I did not plan that.
Cue the child.
You know, I read this line somewhere that earlier it used to be that you planned your life around your work, and now it's that you plan your work around your life, which is pretty much the way it should be, because I think, to the point made earlier, that earlier it used to be that a lot of us would like to pretend that these were, and I really want to say pretend, that these were not considerations that should be, you know, acknowledged, and they're real for everyone in some sense or the other. So it didn't help to force people into situations where they felt almost apologetic or awkward that these were things that they have to bring up. And I mean, and you know, so in that sense, it is a positive. I mean, I think the best example of that I saw was during the NFL draft, where a lot of the coaches had their kids and their family in the room with them when they were making their, you know, decisions. And yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, so in that sense, it has been a positive. The Salesforce culture is one very much which supports that sort of thing. So it's great to see that.
I think, go ahead, Dart.
I was going to say one thing, sorry, which is one of my favorite architectural theorists, a guy named Christopher Alexander. He said that workshops should be in neighborhoods, so that you should have workshops in neighborhoods where people were doing their work such that the kids in the neighborhood could see it and actually participate in it. And so the integration of work into children's lives would be really good in terms of bringing children into the life of work as apprentices or just by osmosis. And so there is a benefit here that's generational. Sorry, John, back to you.
No, and actually I was going to reference a comment you had made once before about how sometimes this separation of people working remotely can often cause a distance in the sense of how they perceive others, and maybe even where they start to think, worse thoughts in the sense of how people might be, thinking on themselves. But I think that's where the importance of really turning on your camera comes into play. And, and Jen had talked about this as well as Ravs, as, when you see where a person's working, right? And you see what, like, well, Anders and I, one of our conversations, he has bikes in his background because he's a cyclist. I was like, wow, this is really great. I now know that Anders is a cyclist because of that kind of stuff. So I think that human, you know, where you used to just see people at work, now you get to see more of a full picture of them. And I think that's really important. What we're actually getting out of this is that we're getting to understand people more of their wholeness as opposed to just who they are for us at work.
So let me do a slight shift in the discussion. In one of the things that's come up in a couple of our previous webinars, and I think that we talked about this in advance a bit, is about onboarding new employees, and particularly in the tech space. But you know, I know that Jen, you're going to have an interesting take on this from a recruiting perspective as well. What about the onboarding experience, bringing somebody into the corporate culture, if you will? Because corporate culture, I think, is beginning to adjust with this same shift. Thoughts on that particular topic?
Onboarding on the talent side is like we're the cheerleader and we're coming in. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like. And if you don't have partnerships with your leaders, with your engineering teams, with your sales teams on what the enablement to be successful in their role looks like, it will not feel good for the folks that you are bringing on board. So what is the plan that you need to make, and the plan that you need to make with how you're measuring productivity is in lockstep with your talent teams and your HR teams, so you're consistent with your messaging. There isn't anything that clarity and consistency of communication while we're in this space is just what we hone in on. And for being in partnership on the engineering side and what it takes to make an impact and what that looks like is just something that we're really focusing on and has really enhanced our partnerships with our leaders.
We've onboarded now 3 people since COVID started, and we're getting better every time. You know, the logistics of it are probably the easier part to figure out, right? But the harder part is the culture and the social connections and feeling like you're part of the team. And we have started doing a whole bunch of things around that specifically. So as an example, we have more cute. So we've got, like, you know, every Friday we used to have games anyway, but we focused a few Fridays where the games are very personal. So it's like a Jeopardy about the people in the office, right? So this person is a cyclist, or this, you know, some just different stories, and you get to know each other better. We've had like smaller group virtual sessions, again, coffee type of just socialized talking, but also something like a reading group where you can, you know, get into a smaller group and maybe not just chit chat, but talk about something around the book. We had this Friday, we're doing a sort of chopped lunch. So everyone's going to get 3 random ingredients that we're all going to open together and try to come up with a dish at the end of it, right? So really trying to get creative about how do we keep building these social connections and get to know each other just a little bit more, because, you know, I think Dart pointed out tribalization. It's not like you naturally, you know, collaborate with everyone in the company on your projects. You'll get to know a few, but how about the others? And that's where I think some of these intentional efforts really pay off.
I have a question for the whole group. It's really related to this onboarding question, which is, it's one thing to bring on somebody who's experienced. It's a completely another thing to have an intern or have somebody who's just starting. And has anybody faced that specific challenge and figured out a way to really make them feel, you know, like they're there?
You know, it's interesting that you did say that. We had about 30 or 40 interns ready to start pre-COVID. And the one team that felt very comfortable moving forward with their interns was our engineering team. And we kept 9 of our engineering interns on board. Smartsheet as a platform has certification in learning our technology is a large piece of what they were doing. So being able to pivot a bit to understanding the technologies in the virtual space and how that works virtually. It ended up being extremely successful to where we're converting, currently we're not finished, we're converting half of our interns to FTEs. And I think that on the intern side, how they grew up with technology is a little bit different than like how I grew up with technology. It was so much easier for them than their leaders to be able to come in and get going and just be ready to go. So we're looking to ramp up our internship fully throughout the org for next year. So really excited about that. We were pleasantly surprised. And I think that's the key, is giving them the opportunity to try and succeed. Don't divert to no, let's not do it out of, risk, being risk adverse, but just really giving an opportunity to see what that looks like.
I will say in ours, because I'm building a new org from scratch, and I think there was only one person I interviewed in person. The rest of the 15 that have already started, I've only seen remotely over Zoom. And I will say it was really great to see how well Dell was able to quickly shift to shipping laptops to sites and getting everything set up that. But from an intern perspective and like a college hire, that's where I'm just now starting to go, because I've been mainly hiring senior talent. But to that point that Jen makes, so many of these students, these college hires, they've done online classes. They've had to self-manage more, I think, than students who go to the class every day, as we did before, where you had to show up at a certain time, you couldn't leave at a certain time. And so I'm seeing that from the interns that we had and what I'm expecting from the college hires is that they actually are going to have an easier time onboarding than, say, somebody who has never had to work remote before.
It was one of my because if you look at what we do, and this is true for both employees and interns, is that one thing is that we do have an enormous amount of content. I mean, this was created over the years. It was there before COVID started, but in a very structured formats that is there for employees, and frankly, it's available to anyone. It's if you go to a site called Trailhead that is related to pretty much all things Salesforce, including our culture and other things, you can sign up for all kinds of certifications. But what we've also seen is that employees and others who come in and have they're guided as to what sessions, what to attend and what to do and things of that nature, have an easier time integrating into the company because they're getting all this content. So in that sense, we were better probably prepared for this than a lot of others might be, just because we had all that infrastructure in place before. But I think that, to your point, and to the point, John, you made, that a lot of the newer, people we are seeing, kids and all that, they're fairly used to this sort of thing. In fact, in some cases, I'd say they like it more than anything else. Actually,
I have a question for Anders and Chris. You guys are taking, contract vendor, people and trying to onboard them into a company. And obviously each company has a different degree of readiness for remote working. What have you guys found that you've needed to do to help accelerate the productivity of a new hire in your space?
Yeah, well, great question. I can speak to internally. We hired a recruiter during the peak of the COVID crisis, and it was interesting for us as a startup to adapt so quickly and change our onboarding process fully remote. So one of the things that included was a high-touch environment, and we actually use a video software called House Party, and we operate. I've shared this, I think, in the last 3 webinars, but it's so powerful for us. It's similar to if you had Zoom on the duration of the day with no red mic, and we bounce questions off of each other. It really reduces that physical barrier. So we were able to onboard this recruiter quickly and get him ramped up with our processes and procedures. I will say, in terms of onboarding contractors with our clients, we actually updated and implemented our contractor care plan. And so Chris can elaborate on what that includes. We co-wrote a lot of it, but it's essentially just a high-touch virtual onboarding plan. Typically, we take candidates or clients out to lunch or coffee. We like to do that white glove approach to onboarding and ramping up, if you will. Well, we've adapted fully virtual with things like gift cards and stuff like that to make sure that the process is smooth, but it's been challenging. Chris, any other points?
That's exactly what we've done. And in fact, because we would normally take our contractors out to coffee maybe once to 4 times the first month, just to make sure we're making the connection with them, that they're making a good connection with the company that they're involved with. We now just send the gift card to them, and we have that Zoom meeting, say, go out and have a coffee on us type of thing. But the other piece of it, John, is that building that relationship, and this is true for you guys as well with your own teams as they're onboarding people, being able to set the expectations that this person is new to the environment. So talking to you as a client, we're advising you as to maybe using House Party, as to having, not once a day phone call type of like, how's it going? How are you doing? But actually getting live on camera, encouraging them that there's no judgment involved regarding cameras and kids walking through the room. Rob's very cute kid, by the way, gotta say. But it's basically it's open and friendly environment, and I think that in some ways this virtual environment can be treated much more as this open environment. But we did have a question from somebody that I think is pertinent to this, which is, besides onboarding and just doing the virtual thing and the virtual meetings and on camera, have we asked interviewers to, as we do coaching around things like discrimination and being able to remove discrimination, obviously in every form and in every way that you can in the interview process, there's a whole new level that has to be taken into consideration when people are looking at someone's home environment. Have we been coaching people on being able to remove any kind of discriminatory behavior or thoughts regarding an actual interview in this environment? Open to the panel.
I think the first part of that question is acknowledging that we all have bias and acknowledging that it's there, and complete removal is impossible. But acknowledging it with your interviewing teams and talking through that and what it looks like for them, and allowing that safe space to have those conversations is what's essential. On the TA side, it's our responsibility to be able to call out pieces of dialogue or feedback that don't land right and that aren't appropriate, and providing a safe space to have that interviewer hear you and the why behind it, and providing the why behind it. Like, this is how that came out. If we're trying to assess this competency, let's think about it this way. And making that an open space, because we all have different experiences and we all have biases that we need to be able to have an open and safe space to talk through. And it's our responsibility on the talent side to keep that in check with your interviewers and your candidates, and providing them a safe space on, this is, if you don't want someone into your home, you can set a background. If you need a different, right? Anders doesn't want everyone to know that he's a cyclist, but he got called out. Being able to have that open dialogue, I think is the first piece in where we start.
I think that was just that was a really great question, and Jen, I really liked your response to it. We always think about that bias and prejudice that would happen when somebody is in the office, and making sure that that people are accounting for, and not only from the standpoint of what the interviewer's bias would be, but also the interviewee feeling comfortable with the interviewer in that situation. And so I think it's actually a two-way thing. I mean, if I'm interviewing somebody and they see something on my back wall that would make them feel nervous, right? About what my views might be or something like that. How does that balance out there? And I think it was a great question. I love Jen's answer. I think I think it does require a lot of deep thought that we all need to put into it.
I also think that having a really diverse interviewer loop is super critical. Because when you do, get into debriefs, we all, I'm actually really proud of the diversity that we have at Uplevel, and we had a very open culture, very sort of inclusive. And, we're not afraid to call each other out on what could be a potential bias. And actually people thank us for it, because as Jen pointed out, everyone has them. But the important thing is that everyone likes being, reminded of that, right? Like, oh, that's a good question. Like nobody feels offended that way. And I think you get that power when you have a diverse group sort of speaking together and making this decision together.
I also think it's really important when you're setting up your interview loops that you are accurately representing where you're at today and honest and authentic with where you want to go. And you don't want to have a bait and switch of, I had this amazing diverse group and this is what it looked like, and when I'm walking into the company and in my meetings it didn't look that way, and we didn't talk through that. And if diversity is one of those pieces that you want to talk through in your interviewing process, be honest with where you're at and be honest with where you want to go as a company. Nobody wants the bait and switch, and right now if authenticity is not on your list high on what you want to present with these candidates, and as a candidate, check on that. Check on where you want to be there.
I have recently come up with a term that I think is important. I think authenticity is the coin of the realm these days. I think that is very much the case. It's interesting. Talking about a moment ago about the background, maybe setting somebody, triggering, if you will. I know that Dart does not have his normal background right now, and maybe tell us why that's the case, Dart, because you're not home right now, are you? And by the way, I just want to say thank you for it truly remote. You're not actually working from your normal spot, but to participate at all, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, so for people on the phone, I'm on the run from the fires in California, evacuated home, I don't know, 5 days ago, I think, which is why I'm in an office with a skeleton foot, is because I'm in my nephew's physical therapy office, and I've got instead of a table, I have a massage table. But honestly, it's well, I think that the main point is that there's layers and layers of things going on, and they're everywhere, right? I mean, we were talking about it before the call. There's hurricanes, there's social unrest, there's COVID. 2020 has just been a year like that. It's surprisingly not uncomfortable. It's fairly easy.
So I have a new question to pose to you guys, and also I want to, Anders, maybe you could be kind of watching the chat and the questions that are coming up, because there's been a lot of conversation going on that we can refer to as well. But I'll hit you guys with just one more, and it's around. Hang on a moment. So has there been any difference or concerns around a split team, if any of you have moved to that, where some folks are working in office, some people are working remote? And is there, we mentioned tribalism earlier, is there any kind of tribalism or difference in effect that's going on in case you have a hybrid going on currently in your companies? Any of you?
I can speak to that, because I mean, the truth is that working for global companies, that's always a challenge. Which is that you always have people who are spread around the world. Some of them are in smaller clusters, and then you have headquarters, and headquarters has larger groups of people. And a really good meeting is balanced in terms of power and balanced in terms of contribution. And that's particularly true, I mean, with a global team, you want the global voice. You want the voice from the field as much as you get every other voice in the room. And so what I did in that situation as a facilitator is I always broke up the room at headquarters. I made sure that that it was difficult to do. People still wanted to get together, but you'd say, nope, everybody's going to be virtual, or everybody's going to be present. And that worked.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that we found here at Dell, and why we're making this our new norm even after COVID. And we're going to provide office space for people who need us, who don't have a work environment that's conducive at home or anywhere else that they happen to be. But it really is one of those things where this has become the leveling the playing field, as we like to refer to it, in the sense that for so long, if you were not in the office, if you were not in the corporate headquarters, something like that, you were, basically a voice that was not heard most of the time. People would talk over you and all that. Where now it's like, everybody's playing at the same level. People have learned how not to talk over people during Zoom conferences. And the other thing too is you can't have a meeting start without starting up the bridge, right? I mean, there's no way that two people in a room are talking and then somebody's like, oh yeah, we're supposed to invite such and such, right? It's like you're all there together. And I think that it's something that companies are going to have to really be careful and watch on, because if they decide to do a certain percentage of people co-located, you're going to wind up with that. And so I did tell my people that, even if you need an office space to work in or something like that, I think I'm going to ban conference rooms, right? Because as soon as you have it, you have one group of people that are excluding another group. So,
one of the things, I wrote a paper on this a while ago, which was one of the mistakes we make with virtual is we think it's bad in person. It's a different medium, and you need to play a medium for what it's strong at. And I can say as a writer that you write what words can do, because you're always working with the medium. And so the strengths of this medium are things like asynchronicity, the ability to record something, there's a lot of strengths to this medium. And one of the things we did with big global meetings was we started running them in a follow the sun model, so that the meeting would move around the world in people's time zones. They would record and type data to each other. So there was a text layer and then there was a video layer, and that would come back around the world. And then once a day we'd meet for an hour all together, and we'd actually do things that we could only do together. And then we would have that meeting go back around the world. And the first time we did it, we stayed awake. The facilitator stayed awake for 2 days straight and just about died. But then we said, this is dumb. Why are we trying to do this all at the same time? The tradition of doing this all at the same time is from traveling into town and trying to pack it all in. And so then after that, we broke it up into multiple days, and we were able to make those round the world meetings work really effectively without killing the facilitators.
Excellent conversation. And I'm going to jump in here with actually a question that's being echoed from the engineering side and the talent side. And it's around the actual interview, the final interview, the infamous or archaic whiteboarding type interviews. And I think it's important we talk about this as a community. We have leaders from different disciplines all at the same time. And I'm sure there's different opinions, backgrounds, or successful pivots here, and that is to the final interview loop. And so I'll kind of blend these two questions, but they echoed the same issue where, have we as a tech community considered changing, updating, or improving our full loop, our final interview process? And then some specifics here around the whiteboarding, the design specifically being difficult over Zoom. Have any of you in your organizations noticed or implemented changes to your processes during coronavirus that maybe we could share and talk about for some tribal knowledge here?
I definitely say you don't want to whiteboard code anymore. Yeah. I mean, there's things for like jdoodle.com and stuff like that you can use for online editors. And that's been something that we've used for tech screens in the industry for a good number of years. But I think to the point about whiteboarding, like systems design and solutions design and that kind of stuff. I know that I tried Zoom's whiteboard, not a good experience. I know that I've had people, and I'm not doing those interviews anymore. I have other people who are doing those interviews, but I know I've had people actually do it on paper and hold it up to the Zoom as we go through. I think we're still figuring it out in a lot of ways as far as the best approach to it. We're trying stylists and that kind of stuff, but still, it's not the same as having an actual whiteboard, like, on the wall where you can sit there and do it, which I've actually done that as well, where it's like, are you thinking something like this in my camera?
Yeah, we had some changes. Some are really welcome, like scheduling. I think I saw a comment pass through earlier, because it's so much easier to schedule when you're not draining up the person out for a day. You can really work with the candidate schedule, an hour here or two, whatever they can take out in their day. And that works easier on our side too. So it's not, you need all the interviewers to be together in the office. So I actually really like that. It's spread out. It gives interview a chance to reflect on their conversation with one person, and then they meet somebody else from the the next day. It's just a better experience from a scheduling point of view. In terms of actual skills, I agree, no coding on the whiteboard. We haven't been doing that for a while. We've been doing these like other online platforms to do that. Systems design, we found we haven't done sort of blank whiteboard successfully. What we have done is we've put up a system design, and usually it's a problem that we are facing, right? So it gives the candidates a really good idea about the challenges we are facing and what we're walking into. And we're like, hey, this is how it's architected today, and get a sense of what challenges they think, share what challenges we're having, and really have a discussion about how we might go through solving that, right? And what I have found is it actually just coming up with something that's real, something that we're tackling in the moment, makes for more information to the interviewee, just being like, okay, I see that, I hear that. And you get a good sense of how is this collaboration going to work on a day-to-day basis? Because a lot of, those kinds of questions are also about, can I work with this person day to day? And so, so I found that to be more useful than sort of, here's a big blank whiteboard, now go design a huge system. And definitely talking about what they do, what they have done previously, just depth of questions there.
I think, one thing that you brought up, Ravs, in your, I think, first question, that somebody by the name of, I think it was Scott Todd, had brought up here about innovation and not having that whiteboard and all that. How is that going to actually impact innovation? As anybody here, like, and I think, Dart, you've worked entirely remotely with teams. How have you guys overcome that whole, or enhance the ability to innovate in a remote work environment?
Well, I only have, I don't think I have a systemic answer. In other words, I've seen instances that the advantages. So here's one example. At least at one company I worked at, we had a very good expert finder capability inside the organization. And so what that meant was that if I needed to find somebody who had a fairly esoteric skill, I could track them down. I needed to draft a patent, but I didn't have the total skill to do it. And so by having that expert finder capability internally, was able to assemble a team of people with diverse skills, really exotic and rare skills too, bring them together and actually do something. But I don't have a systemic answer. I really worry about the sort of the random interactions, the missing random interactions where you meet somebody and two big ideas combine. I don't know how to make that happen.
See, one of the things we do at Salesforce is that we do have a lot of hackathons, and I mean, everyone's a lot of companies do that. I think we really do encourage people to participate very regularly, have these evaluated by our executives and others, and with the goal that it is something that, I mean, ideally we'd like to turn some of these into commercial products, but if nothing else, they'll be better funded projects and, chance to showcase your skills and that sort of thing. And they're very widely publicized, critically inside the company. So pretty much, I mean, anyone who wants to attend can show up and see these, and there's voting and all that goes on by an expert panel and all that. But the point is that given the current environment, the goal is really to give people exposure and the opportunity that even if you don't win the hackathon, you don't even come out in the top 5 or something like that, you've had a chance to present your ideas, to show what you can do. Then the recordings are distributed and all that. I mean, is it ideal? No, but it is certainly something that encourages innovation in a big way.
I want to give props to this tool called Miro that we have used very successfully in conjunction with Zoom breakout sessions. So we've actually had 2 to 3 hour sessions. Initially, you're like, man, 2 to 3 hour virtual brainstorm sessions for, you know, innovative ideas and hackathon discussions seemed like torture. But the Miro platform, what it does have the ability to do is like digital sticky notes. So actually, you know, everyone gets their time to do their own brainstorming of sticky notes, put it on the board. It's a never-ending board, so it really does, you know, give you the feeling of having this huge whiteboard. We do organizations. There's a voting plugin, so everyone gets, you know, a minute to vote on their best ideas. It's all calculated up for you. And then the top 2 ideas, we went into Zoom breakout rooms to discuss them and then come back. Right, so it actually, like, the 2 to 3 hours flew by much quicker than we had thought it would. So check it out. It's worked well for us, not just in sort of brainstorming exercises, but also retrospectives. It's Miro, M-I-R-O.
I see a +1 for Miro here in the chat. Lots of chatter going on there. And going to jump in with an anonymous question, actually an interesting kind of philosophical, I guess, question. Forcing us to think through the balance of the human aspect with the professionalism that we've traditionally been taught. How are we thinking through that? Of course, being remote now and not having the formalities that maybe we have in person. Any comments on that question? How are we thinking through the balance, that human aspect?
And give a thought that I have from my experience. I've previously, before joining Flawless, managed teams remotely, as well as directly in China. And so culturally, there are differences with, so when I was at Apple, I was head of recruiting for China, and at Microsoft, a similar role. And what I found was that there was a difference when I would go to China, meet with my team live, which wasn't as often as I would have liked it to be, versus the interaction here. But the aspect of how people react differently when you're live was night and day. And actually it was, for at least that culture that I was dealing with there, my people directly, they were much more direct with me when we were over a camera than if we were live and in person. They would always allow for the person who was more senior in the room to speak. They would not speak themselves, that type of thing, versus having the direct communication and leveling the playing field, as we spoke of earlier, made a big difference. And actually there was more participation. I don't know if that speaks directly to your question, but that's at least what was my experience.
I think
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I think another experience that I've had in that space too is the lack of body language that you see. Like, you see just kind of heads up sometimes, and sometimes if you have the background, you can't see like if your hands are moving or not, or in what that looks like. But being able to sit in a room and understand the candidate's demeanor and where they're at and their comfort level has been lacking. And so the qualifying questions and the digging, even with on the team, like, you're looking at me and we're having this conversation, but I'm going to go 3 steps further into questioning what's happening and what's going on to get the answer, because I'm not sensing your body language. I'm not with you. And a lot of people do want to keep it short and sweet, and they might be more direct, but you're not getting the color that you usually get when you're in person. And there is Zoom fatigue. So being able to, like, let's get to the point, but let's be really, again, authentic and honest with kind of where we're at. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to dig in a little bit deeper if it's not feeling right or not as a robust of a answer or a question that you're getting back in return.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the quote that 90% of communication is nonverbal, and being able to read those posture and body cues when you're having an internal discussion about an important topic or when you're interviewing a candidate. So I totally agree, Jen. It removes that opportunity, being virtual, and at the same time reminds me why radical empathy is important on both ends for us as leaders to have. John, I saw you with the question there.
Yeah, no, I was going to say to their question where it sounded like to me they're also talking about just that professionalism being eroded, in the sense of personal versus, I'm at work kind of thing. And I think in general, at least in the engineering field, that professionalism, I'm a rebel in the industry because I wear Oxfords. Most people are walking around in t-shirts and flip-flops. And so I think that's, yeah, there you go. I'm a rebel with Chris. But I think that's, come as you are, has been something that's definitely the last few decades, even especially, has started to go away. And I think that with the online, especially like if you're doing a meeting I looked this way at 5:30 in the morning because that's just who I am. But, I meet with people who it's 7 o'clock in the morning and, their hair is all frazzled because they just got out of bed, and I think that when you talk about the direction that we're heading and from an industry standpoint, then also just from a and I would say maybe even it becomes a global cultural thing, is that authenticity that Jen has talked about, which basically it shows itself when you are willing to show not just the professional. Here I'm standing up, I'm coming into the office with a coat and tie, and then I'm going home afterwards. I'm drinking a beer. To the actual, I'm drinking a beer, and that's just how it is. I think it is definitely a cultural change that's going on where we don't necessarily have that distinct, this is my professional mannerisms, these are my personal mannerisms.
I'll tell you one thing when we went virtual at Cisco, which surprised me at first, was that women weren't turning on their camera. And so it was actually an unequal playing field because of that. And so I asked why that was. And a number of women said it's because, look, I don't want to put on makeup. I don't want to do my hair. And guys don't have that same situation as often. And so can't remember where I just heard it. It was a really interesting distinction. It was the distinction between some technology levels out things and some technology amplifies differences. And so they made the distinction between a forklift. I think I can tie this back to this thing. They made the distinction between a forklift, which means that people who are not strong can all lift heavy boxes. And then the thing, which is a microphone, which amplifies your voice, but you have to have a good voice in the first place. And so a microphone has a very different effect as a technology in terms of smoothing out differences. And so there's a couple of things I've noticed. One was that effect, which was that, but another one was, I think we're on the verge of treating men differently if they are at home with kids than we do women. It's very tempting to not cut men the same break that we do women when there's children in the house. And so I think this is another place where I think we have to be very attentive, or we are going to allow this virtual situation to bias us in one direction or another.
New biases coming into.
Yeah.
It's like new biases. It's like these new, because, and I think I can tie this back to the microphone and the forklift. It's like, it's like you don't know whether a technology is going to create new biases or whether it's actually going to smooth out biases. And so this introduction of this technology can do either one.
So you guys don't have to worry about kids running through my room. I'm an empty nester. So that works out. Anders, I think we're up against it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so that's about our time for today. And I wanted to say thank you. We're grateful to each panelist and everyone who registered and joined today. It's really been a fulfilling discussion. And so thank you to everyone who participated in our 5th webinar, and look for details for our next webinar. On that topic, if you have suggestions for what you want to hear being discussed, please send your comments, questions, concerns, any feedback in the survey.
We have a survey.
Yes. So the Zoom survey that will be emailed out to everyone who registered at the end here, and we look forward to your feedback. That's how we arrived at this topic today. And if you're interested in participating and being a panelist, shoot us a message as well. We can have that conversation. So again, we're grateful for your time, everyone. Let's digest this information and have a good rest of the day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.